In this eye-opening series, we uncover the true and documented stories of presidents, prime ministers, and heads of state who converted to Catholicism, not for politics, not for public image, but for something far deeper. Some found God on their deathbed, some returned after a lifetime of denial, and others, quietly, faithfully, embraced the church in moments the world never saw. From deathbed rosaries to private confessions, and from war-torn battlefields to quiet chapels in Rome. These are the authentic Catholic conversion stories of presidents who surprised the world, and maybe even themselves. Tony Blair, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, made headlines in 2007 when he formally converted to Catholicism after stepping down from office. Though not a president in the American sense, Blair's role as the UK's head of government and his later work as a global statesman make him a relevant figure. Raised in the Church of England, Blair was known for his deep personal faith even while in office, though he kept it largely private due to Britain's secular political culture. However, his wife, Cherie Blair, is a devout Catholic, and he attended Mass with her for many years before deciding to officially join the Catholic Church. His conversion took place under the guidance of Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor at Westminster Cathedral. The Vatican reportedly welcomed his decision, and Blair went on to found the Tony Blair Faith Foundation aimed at promoting interfaith understanding. His journey stirred controversy in some circles due to his support for the Iraq War, but among Catholics it also symbolized a personal and serious commitment to faith in a public life often dominated by pragmatism. Blair's conversion was not just symbolic, it was sincere, lifelong, and post-office, making him one of the most prominent political converts to Catholicism in the modern era. Ngô Đình Diệm, the first president of South Vietnam, 1955 to 1963, is one of the most historically significant Catholic leaders in an overwhelmingly Buddhist nation. Though not a convert himself, he was born into a devout Roman Catholic family. His story is deeply intertwined with conversion in political leadership, as many members of his administration and even military officers converted to Catholicism to align more closely with his government. However, Diem's elder brother, Ngô Đình Diệm, was the Roman Catholic Archbishop of Hue, and Diem's rise to power was infused with a strong Catholic identity. What makes Diem notable for this series is his deliberate and passionate dedication to Catholic doctrine, to the point that he governed South Vietnam with a distinctly Catholic ethos, promoting conversions, building Catholic institutions, and favoring Catholics in government posts. His policies and favoritism led to resentment among the Buddhist majority, culminating in the infamous Buddhist crisis of 1963. But what's often forgotten is how deeply Diem's religious conviction shaped his life. He was known to spend hours in prayer and mortification, attended Mass daily, and even considered entering a monastery before choosing public service. His moral rigidity and refusal to bend political compromise, rooted in his Catholic beliefs, eventually led to his downfall and assassination in 1963. While not a convert himself, Diem's influence as a Catholic president who prompted conversions for political alignment makes his legacy critical to understanding faith and power in 20th century geopolitics. Andrés Manuel López Obrador, president of Mexico since 2018, is a deeply spiritual man whose religious identity has often been a subject of quiet speculation. While he was raised Catholic, like the vast majority of Mexicans, he distanced himself from the institutional church in his early political career and was often described as a secular populist with socialist leanings. However, in recent years, especially after taking office, observers have noticed a marked return to traditional Catholic values in both his public rhetoric and private life. Though AMLO, as he's often called, has never held a press conference declaring a conversion to Catholicism, many Mexican journalists and church insiders have noted his increasing affinity with Catholic social teachings. His admiration for Pope Francis, emphasis on moral regeneration, rejection of neoliberal materialism, and even his frequent quotations from the Bible all suggest a man whose personal faith has deepened and perhaps quietly returned to its roots. What makes López Obrador's case intriguing is the broader context. In a country rocked by narco-violence and moral decay, His spiritual posture, heavily influenced by Catholicism, resonates with ordinary Mexicans. He's repeatedly referenced his belief in forgiveness, divine justice, and even Marian devotion in subtle ways. In his own words, "I believe in love, and God is love." So while his journey might not involve a dramatic adult baptism or Vatican ceremony, it exemplifies a modern form of reconversion. A head of state who rediscovered his Catholic identity not through dogma, but through conscience, leadership, and a quiet embrace of transcendent truths. Juan Manuel Santos, the former president of Colombia and Nobel Peace Prize laureate, is another world leader whose personal journey brought him back to the Catholic faith in a profound and transformative way. Born into a prestigious Colombian family with a long political lineage, Santos was raised Catholic, but, like many political elites, drifted from active practice during his earlier career. However, during his presidency, especially in the years he worked on the historic peace deal with the FARC guerrillas, he began to speak more openly about his reconnection with God and the role of faith in guiding his leadership. Santos did not undergo a dramatic public conversion, but by his own admission, he experienced a spiritual awakening during the peace process. In his Nobel Peace Prize acceptance speech in 2016, he directly quoted Pope Francis and referred to the role of forgiveness, justice, and reconciliation, all rooted in Catholic social teaching. He sought private spiritual counsel from Catholic clergy and even traveled to Rome to meet with the Pope, seeking moral clarity and validation for a process that divided his nation. His return to Catholicism wasn't performative or politically convenient. It was born out of necessity, introspection, and a need for inner strength as he navigated Colombia's deepest wounds. He has since described himself as a man of renewed faith, stating that God gave me the strength to pursue peace despite the cost. Santos represents the type of leader who reclaims his faith not out of ideology, but as a compass for mercy, national healing, and moral leadership in an age of polarization. Sam Houston, the legendary general and first president of the Republic of Texas, is one of the most surprising figures in American history to end his life as a Catholic. Though best known as the fiery, larger-than-life Protestant frontiersman who led Texas to independence from Mexico in 1836, Houston's final years reveal a remarkable spiritual turn that few people know about. Born and raised in a Presbyterian family, Houston's early adult life was filled with war, politics, drinking, and scandal. He served as governor of Tennessee, then moved west, ultimately becoming the president of the Republic of Texas. Throughout much of his career, he was known for his temper and vices, a far cry from the devout Catholic he would become. But in his later years, after remarrying and settling down, Sam Houston underwent a profound personal transformation. First, he was baptized into the Baptist faith in 1854. However, that was not the final stop on his spiritual journey. According to historical records and family testimonies, Houston quietly converted to Roman Catholicism shortly before his death in 1863. This conversion was influenced heavily by his second wife, Margaret Lee Houston, a deeply religious woman who remained a devout Christian and encouraged his moral reformation. Though the documentation is less formal than a Vatican announcement, accounts from descendants and Texas clergy confirm that he requested Catholic sacraments at the end of his life. His final days were marked by prayer, penance, and preparation for death, a stark contrast to the wild days of his youth. Houston's story is a classic example of an unexpected deathbed conversion, from military hero to statesman to sinner to believer, and it reflects the powerful Catholic tradition of last-minute repentance and mercy. Jomo Kenyatta, the founding father and first president of independent Kenya, 1964 to 1978, presents a unique case of religious complexity, cultural identity, and eventual reconciliation with the Catholic Church. Born Kamau Wangengi in a Kikuyu village, he was baptized into the Anglican Church in his youth under British colonial rule. However, Kenyatta's relationship with Christianity was complicated by colonial politics, African nationalism, and a deep-rooted belief in indigenous traditions. For much of his adult life, Kenyatta was seen as a political pragmatist more than a religious man. He resisted overt religious affiliation during Kenya's liberation struggle, seeking instead to unify diverse ethnic and religious groups under a common national vision. But in his later years, particularly after securing independence, Kenyatta began to show a renewed interest in Catholicism. What many don't know is that his wife, Mama Ngina Kenyatta, was a devout Roman Catholic. She was instrumental in bringing Catholic teachings into the family, and she ensured their children were raised in the church. Kenyatta's own return to the faith was gradual and private, marked more by practice than proclamation. By the 1970s, he had become close to several Catholic leaders in Kenya, frequently attended Catholic services with his family, and supported Catholic schools and hospitals across the nation. Though he never formally announced a reconversion or conversion in a public way, many Kenyan bishops and Vatican observers considered him reconciled to the Church by the time of his death in 2008, 1978. His funeral was conducted with strong Catholic influence, and he was buried with Christian rites, a decision that marked the quiet return of a nation's founder to the faith of his household. Kenyatta's case highlights a common pattern in political life: men who begin in opposition or indifference to religion, but whose journey brings them home in the end. François Mitterrand, president of France from 1981 to 1995, led the nation as a proud socialist and staunch secularist. For much of his public life, he embodied the ideals of laïcité, France's commitment to the separation of church and state, and was known to keep religion completely out of politics. Yet, behind the scenes, Mitterrand's personal relationship with Catholicism was far more complex and deeply human. Born into a devout Catholic family in southwestern France, Mitterrand was raised in the traditions of the Church. As a young man, he even flirted with Catholic intellectualism before entering politics. But as he rose through the ranks of power, he distanced himself from formal religion, becoming a public symbol of France's secular modernity. However, as his health began to decline in the 1990s due to terminal prostate cancer, a hidden dimension of his life came to light. Mitterrand never made a public declaration of return to the Church, but those close to him, including his priest, Father Philippe Barbarin, later a cardinal, confirmed that the president received Catholic sacraments before his death. In fact, during his final months, Mitterrand is said to have attended private masses and spoken openly about the afterlife, sin, and redemption. He reportedly requested a Catholic funeral, which he received in a quiet ceremony attended by key political and religious figures. One of the most striking symbols of his return to the faith was his choice to be buried with a rosary in his hands, a gesture that spoke volumes to those who had known the atheist president. Mitterrand's end-of-life conversion shows the quiet but powerful pull of faith at the edge of eternity, a final chapter, written not in speeches, but in sacrament and surrender. Oscar Arias Sanchez, twice president of Costa Rica, 1986 to 1990 and 2006 to 2010, and recipient of the 1987 Nobel Peace Prize, is best remembered for his role in brokering peace during the Central American crises of the 1980s. While Arias was raised Catholic like the vast majority of Costa Ricans, his early political career emphasized liberal democratic values, global diplomacy, and economic reforms, often detached from religious overtones. For many years, his personal faith remained in the background, but as he grew older, especially after his second term in office, Arias began speaking more openly about the role of faith, conscience, and the Catholic vision of peace in shaping his philosophy. In interviews, writings, and lectures, he increasingly referenced Catholic social teaching, the dignity of the human person, the moral imperative of peace, and the duty to serve the vulnerable. Though not a dramatic conversion story in the classical sense, Arias's spiritual trajectory is a return, a deepening of Catholic identity that had always been present but matured with time. In speeches at the Vatican and Catholic universities, he emphasized Christ's teachings as the cornerstone of true peace. He has also supported numerous Catholic charities and made public appearances at Mass and religious ceremonies across Latin America. His re-engagement with Catholicism was particularly evident when he spoke against the rising tide of global consumerism and relativism, saying, "A society without God will not build peace. It will only build fear." In Oscar Arias, we find a statesman whose embrace of Catholicism wasn't about political gain, but about anchoring public life in eternal truths, humility, justice, and the Beatitudes.